This is Answer to Job for class number 10. And our assignment covers paragraphs 713 through 733. You remember that last time we started looking at the book of Revelation as a psychological document. And I spoke of it as a massive symbolic image representing the activation of the collective unconscious and the eruption of awareness of the self into consciousness. And I mentioned that dreams of this archetype of the end of the world, the cosmic catastrophe, are not infrequent in our modern experience. Nuclear war and nuclear bomb dreams, that sort of thing in particular. And I also mentioned that very often these dreams, in their net effect, are not as negative or destructive as they first appear on the surface. I want to give you a particularly vivid example of such a dream. It's described in rather fulsome terms, and I'm just going to let the dream speak for itself. Dreamt by a middle-aged woman who had been in analysis for several years. And she labeled this dream Paradise Bomb Shelter. And I quote, "We were in a room which was somewhere between being a bomb shelter and the fortified inner city of an ancient holy town, such as Acre or Jerusalem. I'm skipping a little bit, shorten it a bit. The walls were 4 square, and between the wall and the room, or the building, there was a corridor of air, something like an overgrown, encircling apartment house air shaft, a buffer's region, a no man's land. In this room, privileged company sat, crouching, waiting until we hear the terrible explosion of the bomb descending on the outer world. It happens. Din and the shaking take over, and then they recede. We've been told that so long as we stay inside the walls, and so long as we don't open the huge bronze doors, everything within the shelter will remain free from radiation or fallout, and there will be no death by contamination. A group of 5 of us, feeling our hermetically sealed room is itself fated, and being filled with curiosity to see the ruined outer world, we run to the doors anyway, and proceed to pull them open. That is, 4 of them do. I lose my nerve at the end and fall back to watch from a distance while the others proceed. Finally, with difficulty and a great creaking noise, the great bronze doors open. And as they do so, they let in light, burning, blinding, bitter-tasting, acrid-smelling, deafening, suffocating white light, which is radiation. It doesn't take the four long to decide they've seen all they need to. Soon they're trying to close the doors again. And that's when I step out of my corner and I stand in the middle of the corridor waiting their return. And as soon as the first one returns, I catch her and embrace her warmly. She looks at me, startled but moved, and says, "Don't you realize that now through touching me, you two are contaminated?" I nod my head. Yes, I do know, but that was the point. I wanted to share in her contamination. I wanted to indicate love, sympathy, admiration, and a desire to be akin to all the consequences of the new human condition. Then I asked her, "What did you see outside?" And she answers, "Only a lot of broken glass." Next, we go about preparing for the deaths we feel sure will result from the exposure at the gate. And one or two people did die. But after that, there's no further deaths. And it's as though the death rate had slowed down to normal. It's incredible. We'd expected a ceaseless parade of dying and agonized radiation-sickened citizens. But now it begins to look as if it will take a lifetime for us all to die. Then I see a family group sitting as if for a formal portrait. And I realize we've even been given the powers of reproduction and generation. So this life is like the other, only we're free from the bind of stagnation and immortality. That's an interesting angle. Free from the bind of immortality. Through growth and decay, we can change, and bomb shelters can become holy cities. Well, I'm not going to offer any interpretation of that dream. It pretty well speaks for itself, showing you how what first appears as destructive nuclear light turns out on closer inspection, at least when it's approached with the right conscious attitude, be rather an image of initiation into authentic human existence, which includes mortality, of course. Now, I want to go on to talk in more detail about this rich and complex book of Revelation. There are a great many specific, detailed images that are relevant to our psychological work, and I want to draw your attention at least to a few of them. The book starts out with a vision of the numinosum, in particular form. This is in the first chapter. John says, I turned to see the voice that spoke to me, and I saw 7 golden candlesticks, and in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and hair were white like wool, white as snow, and his eyes were like a flame of fire, and his feet like fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice was the sound of many waters. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. And quite understandably, John then adds, when I saw him, I fell at his feet as if dead. This is a particularly interesting image of the self as an instrument of separatio, the two-edged sword, which is a symbol of the Logos, is reminiscent of Christ's statement, I came to send not peace, but a sword, to separate family members from each other. This image belongs to the whole symbol system of separatio, which I talk about in the separatio chapter in Anatomy of the Psyche. Albrecht Dürer has a great picture of this particular image. I reproduce it on page 192 of Anatomy of the Psyche. I also have come across another very interesting image of the same nature, the self as an instrument of separatio. It's in the series of pictures to go to make up a case history. It's going to be published shortly. Some of you will know this case from my presentation of it here a few years ago. And one of the pictures in that series was of a boy holding on to a balloon which was carrying him up into the sky, and as he went heavenward, came into the vicinity of a great saw-blade sun. The sun as a revolving saw blade with rough, sharp teeth. It's the same image as the image of Christ with the two-edged sword coming out of his mouth. In both cases, the self is manifesting as a sharp-edged instrument that divides. It's the kind of instrument that is most apt to show up in psychological situations where the logos, where the separating, judging function of the psyche is not very conscious. It's most apt to show up in psychologies that are kind of diffuse and not very sharply discriminating. Then all that missing discrimination is residing in the self, and it expresses itself in this kind of image. Another interesting item shows up a few verses later from what I've just quoted, because the voice then informs John that the mystery of the 7 stars which thou sawest in my right hand on the 7 golden candlesticks, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches. And the 7 candlesticks which thou sawest are the 7 churches. So we have a very interesting image here. We have an image of 7 candlesticks or lamps in the heavenly realm, which are duplicated on the earthly realm as the 7 churches. It's as though the 7 archetypal luminosities are being mirrored on earth by the 7 churches. And furthermore, that the 7 stars are described as the angels of the 7 churches. And you will notice that the letters that are written to each of the 7 churches are are each addressed not to the churches themselves, but to the angel of the church. So the first one says, unto the angel of the church of Ephesus, write thus and so. I think this image refers to a very interesting piece of psychological phenomenology that remains to be examined and elaborated. Because I consider these angels of the churches to refer to the collective psychic organisms that the churches are examples of. There's only one other place in the Bible where this same image comes up. It comes up in the 10th chapter of Daniel, where an angel, in talking to Daniel, refers to an angel of Persia and an angel of Greece, and also mentions the fact that the archangel Michael is the guardian angel of Israel. So we're there told that nations have their angels as well as churches. What I think those images refer to is the fact that every collective entity that is constituted by a group of individuals that are more or less identified with some particular collective theme. But every such collective entity is a separate psychic organism. It's an angel, so to speak. It transcends the mere existence of the individuals it composes. It's as though the individuals form the cells of that larger organism. And if you have such an idea and start applying it to the way collective organisms behave, it's very illuminating. So I recommend it for your consideration. Next item is the so-called throne vision. That's found in the 4th chapter of Revelation, beginning chapter. I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like an emerald. And round about the throne were 24 seats. And upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white raiment, with crowns of gold on their head. And out of the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices, and 7 lamps of fire, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne a sea of glass, like crystal. And round about the throne were 4 beasts, full of eyes, before and behind. One like a lion, one like a calf, one had the face of a man, and the 4th was like a flying eagle. See, this has many of the same imagery as the vision of Ezekiel. So we've got a continuation of tradition here. One point I want to note is that this throne symbolism, which occurred first of all in Ezekiel's vision, and here again in this one, is an example of the archetype of the chair. You might not think of the chair as an archetype, but it is. The great cathedrals of Europe are magnificent buildings built around a chair. Cathedra means chair. It's the chair that the bishop sits in. And that's why when one addresses the chair, one's referring to the head of the organization, Mr. Chairman. He's addressing the archetype. And this shows up in dreams sometimes. Somewhere I can't give you the reference of it right now, but somewhere Esther Harding wrote a paper entitled or on the theme of the analyst's chair, and she brought a lot of dreams in as examples of how the chair of the analyst takes on archetypal authority and expresses itself. It becomes a kind of cathedra, and analysts, have a great tendency to speak ex cathedra. So this throne vision is an example of that chair archetype. And this is then followed in the next few chapters by a whole series of events. There's a scroll with 7 seals on it, each of which is opened one at a time. And then 7 angels show up, and each one blows a trumpet. And we've already had seven stars in the hand of the Son of Man, and the 7 lampstands, so that the archetypal 7 is very prominent indeed in this material. And the question, of course, is what does it mean? And the only way that we can elaborate this kind of material with any kind of empirical validity is by the method of amplification. So we look around to see in what other contexts the number 7 is to be found. And a very prominent context in ancient thinking were the 7 planetary spheres. The idea of the planetary ladder, that as you go step by step from Earth all the way up to the top region, the area of the fixed stars, you go through each of the planetary spheres, and all 7 planets. Then each one is a rung on the ladder, 7 rungs of the ladder, and then when you get to the 8th level, then you're up to the very top. That's the level of the fixed stars. So there are 7 steps between Earth and heaven, and that's why the number 7 is associated with the initiation process. You go through all 7 grades, then you are initiated into the very highest level. And 7 is to 8 as 3 is to 4. It's on the way to totality. It's the last station before final totality on the second level. So those would be some of the implications then of number 7. Another item I want to allude to is the question of the marked ones. In chapter 7, we read, "And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel." In many of the medieval pictures of the apocalypse, there will be illustrations of this process. There will be long lines of people lining up, ready to get their seal. And as each one comes up, they'll get a seal on his forehead, and it will be usually it will be a cross, but an equilateral cross. Now that's one version of the marked ones. But we've got another version of the marked ones in chapter 14, starting with verse 10. "These people shall drink the wine of the wrath of God, and the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night. Those who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name." So here's another version of the mark. These ones who have worshipped the beast have the mark of the beast on their forehead, and they are marked for damnation, just as the others are marked for salvation. Now this is the 2 versions of the same archetype. It's one positive and one negative. See, to be marked means to be set apart, means to be one of the elect. As with all archetypes, they're bipolar, and this one is too. And you can be elected to be blessed or be elected to be damned. But psychologically considered, when this image comes up in dreams, we understand it as being marked for individuation. And in the psychological context, it isn't an either-or. It's rather like that motto that's put over the Conjunctio castle in the chemical wedding of Christian Rosencreutz, where it says on all who enter, congratulations and condolences. So to be marked has that double implication, actually. And if you don't split the opposites, it means that you're going to get a share of both curses and blessings. You see. This comes up in dreams, not infrequently. And it's easy to miss unless you know the archetype. You see, all archetypes are missed unless you know them, unless you recognize them. They'll just slip right by you. But if you know them, then you can nail it down. Next item I want to speak about is stars falling from heaven. Find a reference to that. 6th chapter, 6:12. And I beheld when he'd opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken in a mighty wind. And then again in Revelation 8:10, third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as if it were a lamp. So we got two different images of stars falling from heaven. This belongs to the same symbolism as Satan falling from heaven, or the angels that descended to marry the daughters of men in Genesis. It's the same image of descent of archetypal material that's falling out of the transpersonal realm and falling into the ego. So it belongs to the image, to the symbolism of coagulatio. I give a dream example of this image on page 90 of Anatomy of the Psyche. In this dream, a piece of the moon fell out of the sky into a patient's apartment. That presaged the assimilation of a bit of femininity that had previously been lacking in her ego. Another item, the symbolism of 1/3. In Revelation chapter 8, starting with verse 7. Chapter 8, verse 7. Symbolism of 1/3. First angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of the trees was burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. And the second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died. And the third part of the ships were destroyed. And then jumping down a little bit, and the star that fell from heaven, and it fell upon a third part of the rivers. And the third part of the waters became wormwood. The third part of the sun was smitten. The third part of the moon. The third part of the stars were darkened. You see, on and on, this repetition of 1/3, so that we're forced to consider, to ask ourselves, what does that mean? It was something that came to my attention as a result of a dream some years ago. I had a very sizable dream, and one of the images of it was that terrorists burst into a church service and slaughtered 1/3 of the congregation. And for some time, I didn't get what this dream, especially what that particular image was all about. And then, when I made the connection with the book of Revelation, everything in the dream fell into place. Then I recognized the whole dream to be a last judgment dream, equivalent to Revelation. As soon as I realized that that's what happens when one finds the right amplification to a particular dream image. Find the right amplification, it's illuminating. Suddenly it's like a light is turned on, and then you've got your bearings and you know what it's about. And as soon as I realized that the significant application to that particular image was the book of Revelation, where all these 1/3 are destroyed, my dream then was an expression of the apocalypse, you see. It was, and then everything fell into place. It still doesn't explain what the meaning of 1/3 is. I gave some thought to that, and that thought is expressed in a chapter in Ego and Archetype called Trinity and Fraternity. It's my conclusion that the number 3 is not always just an amputated quaternity, which in some cases it is, but that especially in terms of younger psychology, the number 3 is the number of egohood. 4 is the number of selfhood. 3 is the number of egohood, because it's the conscious ego that must function in time and space, and time and space are ordered around the number 3. Eternity is ordered around number 4. So I understand all this emphasis on 1/3 being destroyed. I understand that to indicate an assault on the number 3. In other words, an assault on the ego attitude. At an earlier time in life, the original state of wholeness, which is kind of latent fourness, has to be assaulted by the number 3. And you'll sometimes encounter dreams to illustrate that point. One good example that I recall is the dream of a young man of puer aeternus type, who needs more 3-ness in his life, dreamt that a pie was being divided up into triangular sections. The original wholeness was was being assaulted by the triangle in order for the ego to come into fuller manifestation. All right, the next item is the sun and moon woman. This comes up in chapter 12 of Revelation. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And being with child, she cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. Behold, a great red dragon, 7 heads and 10 horns. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and cast them to the earth. The dragon stood before the woman to devour her child as soon as it was born. Brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and the child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God. Now, you know, Jung talks about this image. It's quite an important image to him. First, in paragraph 710, he refers to it. There appeared in heaven, after the destruction of Jerusalem, a vision of the sun woman. She was in the pangs of birth, and a great red dragon wanted to devour a child. This vision is altogether out of context. Whereas with the previous visions, one has the impression they were afterwards revised, rearranged, and embellished. One feels that this image is original and not intended for any educational purpose. Then in paragraph 713, it says again, the man-child is caught up to God, who is manifestly his father, and the mother is hidden in the wilderness. This would seem to indicate that the child figure will remain latent for an indefinite time, and that its activity is reserved for the future. Then he speaks again in paragraph 716. Under these conditions, the newborn man-child would have been bound to have had a noticeably positive aspect, because in accordance with his symbolic nature, he would have compensated the intolerable devastation wrought by the outburst of long pent-up passion, being the child of the conjunction of opposites, of the sun-filled day world and the moonlit night world. He would have acted as a mediator, and would thus have become a beneficent savior who would have restored the balance. Let me just state it baldly and not beat around the bush. I think we can consider this episode of the child born of the sun-moon woman, who is actually a personification of the Sol-Luna conjunctio, sun-moon woman. This child is in anticipation of Jungian psychology, lodged right in the middle of this ancient text. You see, John's God image was split, because as characteristic of that numinosum with the sword coming out of its mouth, separatio has been the key theme for the Christian eon. And the man-child born of this sun-moon woman is rather a product of the conjunctio rather than the separatio. And so it represents the unified God image that only becomes possible in the Jungian eon, and that will come about progressively with the continuing incarnation of God image in earthly man. And that's how I understand what Jung is telling us when he says in paragraph 713, the man-child is caught up to God, who is manifestly his father, and the mother is hidden in the wilderness. This would seem to indicate that the child figure will remain latent for an indefinite time, and that its activity is reserved for the future. And that future is now, and Jung, who now has understood and interpreted that image, is performing the function of bringing its meaning and its realization to fulfillment. Okay, I'm going to stop with that. And carry on next time.